All right, so thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We are going to be talking about extending asset life with condition-based maintenance. We have with us Dennis Krieger from Clockworks Analytics, as well as Fred Kraus and Octavian Vlad from iOffice and Space IQ. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone is on mute, so if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the questions section, and we can try to get to those throughout the presentation. And then we are also recording this session, and we will be sending it out to everyone probably either later today or tomorrow. So with that, I will turn it over to Dennis.
Good morning, everyone. Dennis Krieger here with Clockworks Analytics. Really excited to be here with you guys today to talk about this new integration between Clockworks Analytics and Space IQ. So today we're going to introduce both of our companies, a bit about ourselves and what our products actually do. We're going to get into the kind of basics of fault detection and diagnostics. So kind of covering off how Clockworks Analytics actually works and how the automated analytics that we run can now synchronize with the work you're doing in Space IQ. We'll break down that integration, and then we'll finally get to the fun part where we'll show you what it looks like in the real world, take you through a couple examples really quick. So pretty packed agenda. We'll jump straight into it here, guys. For those who are maybe meeting Clockworks for the first time, we are a fault detection and diagnostics software application, which is a really long way of saying we help buildings identify the top performance issues that are occurring, things that will impact energy, comfort, or the equipment reliability within that building. So we're running automated analytics to find those issues, and we're producing diagnostics to help people act on that information. We've been doing this for a long time. So Clockworks has been around for over 10 years. We have 2,500 buildings and counting on the platform today, representing over 400 million square feet. But really the thing that we are most proud of are these final two stats on the right here. We've seen our users of Clockworks complete over 20,000 tasks as a result of the automated analytics that we run. And we've seen those tasks result in a lot of dollars saved when it comes to energy performance in the building. I think this is what we're going to really emphasize today during our discussions on how Clockworks and Space IQ really work together to convert this automated analysis that we're running into something that can be worked on by people in buildings. And that's really what gets us excited about the two software platforms here coming together. With that, I'll kick it over to you, Fred, talk about iOffice and Space IQ.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, real quickly to introduce iOffice and Space IQ. We give businesses tools to connect their most valuable resources, which are the people, the places, and the things being the assets that support the people and places. We have a comprehensive portfolio of workplace and asset management solutions that enables companies to make decisions based on the data that we provide that allow them to improve their environment, their built environment. We are deployed in over 85 countries. We have 10,000 or more customers globally, managing over 2 billion square feet of space. Next slide. So within the iOffice and Space IQ family of products is Archibus. And Archibus is also been around for a long time and is really an all-in-one integrated workplace management solution that helps organizations manage and optimize space, operations, maintenance, and do portfolio management and capital planning. So that's a brief introduction to iOffice and Space IQ and Archibus within it. I'll hand it back over to you, Dennis.
Thanks, Fred. So again, today we're going to really break down how these two kind of applications work together to enhance the way that people are maintaining buildings. Before we get to that, we're going to really break down the basics of how fault detection and diagnostics really works. Hopefully this is kind of useful to the majority of the audience so that we understand how these tools work in the building, how they can create new information for you to act on when you get to a work order or a task. So bear with me here. We're going to just kind of break down the basics of what is fault detection and diagnostics. Starting with really why we deploy these tools. So when we look at buildings in the world today, we know that there are inefficiencies across the board. There's been many studies to back some of these numbers, but we know that energy is being wasted. Up to 30% of energy is typically wasted in a building. We know that the indoor environment is not well maintained at times. We have seen that people in buildings are not comfortable. Nowadays, we see that indoor air quality in buildings can be underperforming as well. And lastly, we know that the big equipment in those buildings can fail prematurely. So your air handlers and chillers can enter a mode of operation that can become damaging. We can see that lead to a premature failure in equipment. So this is really the challenge in buildings. How do we find those hidden issues that are wasting energy, creating discomfort or indoor air quality issues, and leading to equipment reliability issues in our critical equipment in the building? One way to think about this is comparing a traditional preventative maintenance routine to what you are enabling when you deploy a fault detection and diagnostic tool. So for those familiar with building maintenance, this should look familiar. We have a building here with some cooling towers, chillers, boilers, air handlers, and VAV boxes. And if we are completing a preventative maintenance routine, then we are going to go out to this equipment on a set frequency. So I might get out to my chillers and boilers once a month. I might get to my air handlers once a quarter. And my goal is to complete a kind of manual checklist, right? I go to that equipment, I check filters, I check for vibration and bearings and all the things that can go wrong in that equipment through this manual checklist approach. When we introduce a tool like Clockworks, we are introducing this ability to automate a lot of those checks that you're going to be performing on the equipment. So when we compare this building to one that is equipped with fault detection and diagnostics, we're going to be turning on a whole bunch of automated engineering checks every single day. So this is, a nice enhancement. It gives you a lot of information that you didn't have before about the building. And at a minimum, you're going to know about issues that are occurring in your equipment much faster, much sooner. It's going to allow you to have a proactive kind of stance as you are managing this building and working with the occupants within. So this is impressive, cool. I have a lot of automated checks now humming along in my building, but what am I doing with this information? That's really the big challenge. Well, the answer to that is to start shifting your operations toward a proactive maintenance strategy. And that's what we're going to talk about today with this integration between Clockworks and an Archibus. So the more proactive you can be in addressing some of those hidden performance issues, the more you're going to see your building run at its peak conditions. There's two great studies backing these charts here. One is through the Smart Energy Analytics campaign. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend going and finding that and reading through some of the findings there. But this chart is showing what happens when you proactively maintain your building with these tools. This energy savings profile can result as you are addressing those highest impact issues day in and day out. This chart here on the right was backed by Pacific Northwest National Labs. The report was called O&M Best Practices. This summarizes what can happen, again, as you shift to that proactive mode of maintaining your building and seeing an impact to the equipment life and reliability itself. So eliminating breakdowns, reducing the amount of downtime you have in your building. These impacts, frankly, can be much more substantial to the actual businesses that are running in these buildings, right? So this secondary chart here, certainly harder to quantify from a dollars perspective, but knowing that your building is up and running and at its peak conditions all the time certainly improves the way that you're able to maintain that building with your maintenance teams. So this is kind of what we're trying to achieve as a result of deploying these tools. Real quick on just how we deploy the combined solutions here. So we're going to break down the nuts and bolts of how we go to an existing building and get it set up with fault detection and diagnostics with Clockworks and connect those automated analytics to Archibus so that you can start acting on that information in a very seamless manner. So we're going to go through the kind of connection process, how we get to the building and grab data from the BMS, how we set up our diagnostics to know where we have performance issues in that building, how we integrate to Archibus, and how you act on that information within the Archibus platform. So first things first, we do need to connect to the building, meaning we need to deploy something in that building that can speak to the building management system and grab data points from each controller that is managing the air handlers, the VAV boxes, the chillers in this building. So when we deploy clockworks in the building, the first step is to install a software application that can speak to those BMS controllers, grab data every 5 minutes, and push that data up to a cloud environment where we actually run our analysis. So this first step is critically important. It kind of gives us the data we need to find those performance issues that are occurring in the building, and it relies on open standards within the BMS that allow us to do this level of communication. So this first step is critically important. We could probably spend a whole hour just on this slide and the topics that would come out of it, but suffice to say, this is an important first step so that we have something to look at and analyze from the building. Once we've grabbed that data and we have a steady kind of data flow that we've established on that site, we are able to analyze that data to look for performance issues. This is really the part where fault detection diagnostics is producing outputs that we can act on. So in a nutshell, we are looking at a piece of equipment like this air handling unit. We are running dozens of engineering performance checks. Again, these are the automated analyses that are kind of supplementing the preventative maintenance that you're doing through your manual checklist approach. So these automated checks are running. They're looking for everything that could be going wrong on this piece of equipment, from its ventilation performance, its heating and cooling performance, down to the actual temperatures and humidities that it is maintaining out in the zone. When an issue is detected, we produce what's called a diagnostic report in Clockworks. We will demo this in much more detail today and show you exactly what type of information is available when we detect an issue in a building. But in a kind of high-level view, we are summarizing the problems that occurred, like simultaneous heating and cooling. We're pointing you to the root cause of those issues, like a leaking hot water valve, and we are quantifying the impacts of those issues as they relate to energy. So how many dollars are we wasting as a result of those issues, but also prioritizing their impacts to the comfort and equipment reliability of the building itself. It's this combined prioritization with the information you need to know about where and when these issues occurred that helps people go act on this information very quickly. Now, when we talk about connecting Clockworks to Archibus, this is really the handoff, if you will. So Clockworks is producing this diagnostic report. We are now able to send that information to Archibus. This is where things get really interesting and fun when you think about it from a maintenance perspective. With Clockworks is producing a finding that breaks down the equipment and problems that occurred, we can synchronize that automated analysis with a workflow that can be performed in Archibus. So we map the equipment and types of work that should occur, along with the work groups that should receive this information, so that there's an automated way to generate a work order at an appropriate priority so that teams can come into work each day with an automated, prioritized punch list ready to go for them. This is what kind of gets us really excited about this integration, because it really transfers that automated information that's being produced into something that's very digestible for a maintenance team. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Fred, to talk about how those teams actually act on that information within Archibus.
Sure, thanks, Dennis. And really just building on what Dennis mentioned, Clockworks has the analytics that produces these diagnostics, but then to complete the cycle, who acts on them, and how do the diagnostics get taken care of to make sure that the facility is maintained and the assets are correctly maintained. And that's really where Archibus comes in. As Dennis mentioned, Archibus has the inventory of assets, the location information, and captures work teams and technician information and maintenance workflow such that we can connect the diagnostics to the teams that will go out and check on them, check on the assets to make sure that they stay healthy. So taking that into a little bit more detail, in Archibus, a maintenance manager would configure the analytics that come from clockworks and determine which ones are worthy enough to automatically create a work ticket, a work order for them. So we will base that on a priority level. So we have analytics information, we have the priority, and we can automatically create work tickets that are worthy of being looked at right away. So we import the diagnostics, automatically create those work orders, and the Archibus SLA engine takes care of the rest, assigns it to the right work teams, who then go off and take a look and fix issues as they are reported in the work order. Furthermore, we do have all of the other diagnostics that may not have automatically created work orders, so that the maintenance manager has some other context for the assets they're looking at. An asset may be associated with more than one diagnostic. Some of them may be higher priority than others. We have all of that context in Archibus from clockworks, so that when someone is in front of an asset, not only they're looking at the asset maintenance history, the diagnostics that generated the work order, but they may also be looking at diagnostics history and other diagnostics that may affect the asset that they're looking at. And with all of that, of course, the aim is for the organization to maintain healthy assets and save money. And I think I'll kick it back now to Dennis, and we'll get ready for the demonstration.
Thanks, Fred. Maybe I'll pause. Danielle, I don't know if we should pause for any questions. Hopefully we covered off some of the basic concepts there, but before I shift gears out of PowerPoint here, any questions from the audience that you want me to jump into real quick?
Sure, so we did have one come in. I think this is more just trying to confirm that Clockworks has cumulative saving reports where clients can set a benchmark or start line of when they want to start the cumulative savings report. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, there's kind of two styles, if you will, of tracking your energy performance and then the kind of cost savings or avoidable costs that's occurring when you are proactively fixing these issues. I like to think about it as kind of a top-down or a bottom-up approach, if hopefully that makes sense as I continue to explain. So from a top-down perspective, we can take utility meters and produce energy benchmarks that give you the ability to say, hey, yesterday I exceeded my expected energy performance by 10% or 15%. It's very easy to quantify that kind of top-down view to say the cost of that energy inefficiency was $5,000 or $500 or whatever it is, right? So we can do that in Clockworks and kind of take an energy benchmarking style view of each site. We can also, though, take what I consider a bottom-up approach, meaning we can look at an individual piece of equipment and the conditions that are being analyzed to say this air handling unit is wasting this much energy per day because I can measure the actual airflows and changes in temperatures across that piece of equipment and quantify it in that way. So we do both in Clockworks. They both have kind of unique ways of engaging the user and kind of helping to prioritize work. We'll probably focus more on that bottom-up approach today because we're going to be really focused on the diagnostics themselves in the demo. So hopefully we'll be able to reinforce that when we show you what it looks like here.
Great, thank you, Dennis. And a couple more questions came in. So while you're switching to the demo, I think we can ask these. What version of Archibus does Clockworks work with? Fred.
Yes, clockworks is the integration is built into the latest version, which is due out in just a few weeks, just a couple of weeks. It's Archibus version 26.3.
Perfect, thank you. And the other question was, does Clockworks work with existing BMS like Honeywell?
Yeah, excellent question. So we can integrate with any existing BMS that supports kind of an open communication protocol, which is a kind of loaded statement. We have thousands of existing buildings connected to Clockworks today, so we've seen just about every type of BMS make, model, and vintage that you could expect. Any modern BMS is typically very easy to connect to. There are some red flags on older legacy systems that frankly probably need an upgrade for other reasons anyway, but something to kind of look for when you're scoping the project initially and kind of making sure that your BMS that you're looking at is, let's say, integration friendly and ready to communicate with a tool like Clockworks. We can certainly support you in that investigation early on to make sure that it's we have a clear path for getting to the data that we need.
Perfect, thank you. I think we're ready to move forward with the demo.
Awesome. This is going to be a fairly abbreviated demo. You can see in my menu here on the left, I have a lot of things I could jump into, but for today, I really want to just focus on one thing, and that's the diagnostics that we are producing. Again, this table that you see here is a list of automated analytics that we have produced. The default view that a user is coming into here is a list of issues that occurred yesterday that had the highest impact to energy performance and the avoidable costs associated with those energy inefficiencies. So when I come into this list, I can see I have multiple buildings merged into one common list. I have all of the equipment within those buildings being analyzed, whether it's chillers, boilers, air handlers, VAV boxes, etc. And I have one common way now to prioritize what should I work on right now that has that highest impact to energy and efficiency across my entire building portfolio, whether that's one building or 100. This table is able to help you prioritize where you should focus your time and energy to optimize building performance. Now, this default view can certainly be manipulated, right? We can come into this diagnostics table with a purpose. If I want to save energy, well, here's my list. I can grab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues here spanning multiple equipment and multiple buildings and start to work on those. I can also shift my focus, and that's where these priorities come into play. So this E here, our default view, is the energy priority, ranked on a simple 0 to 10 scale. So 10 being the highest severity and 0 being the lowest. If I resort my list and focus on the indoor environment or comfort issues, as we call them in Clockworks, I'm able to kind of tackle a much different type of view, if you will. So as I sort by comfort, you'll see that I am loading in a much different mix of equipment. I'm focused a lot more on zone units now and their compliance to temperatures and humidities and airflows that are required to keep that indoor environment at a comfortable and healthy range. My final category here is M for maintenance. This allows me to look for some hidden equipment reliability issues ranked by the type of equipment and the severity of those issues that are occurring. So I can see where I might have failed dampers, or I even have an entire boiler that is operating at low flue O2 levels, or chillers that are operating outside of the recommended refrigerant pressure ranges. So just in clicking through and kind of resorting my list, I can automatically see where my top issues are occurring, and I can come in and grab kind of the top 5, top 10, whatever I have maybe the appetite for, and start to get to work on these issues. Now, what's exciting about the integration with Archibus is that we help take some of that kind of logic out of the human and into some automated integrations with Archibus, meaning if I know that I will always want to act on a priority 10 energy issue, I can set up the integration so that this item on my list is automatically going to Archibus, and it's automatically creating a workflow so that my team is armed with this as a task instead of a diagnostic report. So we're kind of shortcutting a lot of steps in how you convert the highest priority issues across all of your buildings into a very specific action that you can work with your teams to configure. So that's the high level view of diagnostics. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and open one of these up, and we're going to talk about what you get in the diagnostic report itself. So what we aim to do in Clockworks is give you all the information you need to go create the right type of action on this issue and go to that piece of equipment ready to fix something instead of having to investigate and explore what went wrong manually. And so this diagnostic report cuts down on a lot of manual investigation. Again, this is linked to the Archibus work order that is being created. So a user is able to pull up this diagnostic report at any time and read through all the findings that occurred through this automated analysis that was performed. So if I break down this individual diagnostic report that we're looking at here, I'm looking at a single air handling unit in a building, AHU3. One thing to kind of point out is just the number of data points that go into a single analysis here. So don't expect you all to read these paragraphs of data points that have been collected from the BMS, but these are those inputs, right? When we connect to the building and start reading data every 5 minutes, these are the data points that we are actually grabbing. So there's supply air temperatures, return temperatures, coil positions, right? All the things that tell us exactly what this air handler is doing every 5 minutes throughout the entire day serve as the inputs to our analysis. The fact that we're looking at all of these data points together in a single analysis is really what makes this fault detection and diagnostics unique, right? It's not a simple comparison of the supply temperature versus set point. It's a holistic engineering analysis of everything that went wrong on this piece of equipment on this day. The result of that analysis is shown below. So we provide, again, the prioritized impacts against comfort, energy, and maintenance. This particular issue is impacting comfort, energy, and maintenance across the board. So we kind of found the trifecta here. The reason we have priorities across all three categories is because of these problems that are listed in plain text below. This text is highly useful. If you've ever tried to go fix something in a building, it's certainly nice to have a plain description that tells you exactly what went wrong. So the problem here is simultaneous heating and cooling. Why are we doing simultaneous heating and cooling? Because we have a preheating coil valve leaking or stuck open. So already I am greeted with a very simple to interpret description of those issues. And this text that you see is automatically produced based on what occurred in that piece of equipment, meaning simultaneous heating and cooling can be caused by a leaking valve. It could also be caused by a control override or some other symptom that is causing this issue. This text will actually update based on what was detected to give you a very clear description of the problem and cause of each issue. So that's why we have an energy priority. We have simultaneous heating and cooling wasting $791 in a day. We also have issues with return air relative humidity being higher than set point, which is why we are flagging this as a comfort issue as well. This air handling unit could be serving an entire floor of a building, and if our humidity levels are too high, we're going to flag that as a potential comfort issue in that space. Now, for the sake of time, I might just jump to a few others here and kind of give you the abbreviated version here. The last one I want to flag is this idea of kind of commissioning the performance of your equipment each and every day. A common example of that is looking at how pieces of equipment were designed to be controlled versus what we're seeing in the actual performance data itself. So this problem here, where we are telling you about a supply temperature set point that is not resetting correctly, is really our ability to compare a set point on this piece of equipment against the intended control sequence. In this case, a reset strategy where that supply temperature should be resetting against return air in this example. Likely common cause of that is an overridden set point. So all of these problems and possible cause statements are also transferred to Archibus. You'll see that here in a second. But again, any user can always come back to this diagnostic report in Clockworks and also engage with what I consider to be some more fun stuff down here, which is the data itself, right? So all the data that we extracted from the BMS to produce those findings will be displayed back to you automatically, so you can understand when these issues occurred and how severe they were. So I have my issues listed here over the course of this 24-hour period. I can see that all issues were occurring 24 hours out of that day. They're shading each hour block here, telling me that this is happening consistently. Each chart here, I'll spare you breaking down every single chart, but these charts are designed to give you kind of that engineering perspective on how these kind of temperatures and flows are varying from their intended design or their optimum state. So this first chart is just a breakdown of supply temperatures and set points. As I scroll down, we can start to get into the performance issues themselves. This chart here is showing me what that overridden set point looks like. So I'm comparing a supply temperature set point that we read again from the BMS. It's this cluster of black dots here, locked in at 54 degrees, versus the intended reset schedule, which is this red line. So if this unit were running in its intended state, those black dots would be overlaid on that red line. That's why we're flagging this as a potential override on this piece of equipment. This is the main culprit for our simultaneous heating and cooling. This is a breakdown of what we're seeing on that preheat coil valve. The valve itself is commanded to a closed state. That's this dotted blue line at 0%. But we are measuring this delta T, so this increase in temperature between the incoming air, the mixed air temperature on this green line, and the discharge temperature off that coil on the red line. So this doesn't make sense. We have a closed valve, yet we are registering a rise in temperature. So we're flagging this as a leaking valve that's allowing hot water to enter that coil and increase the temperature of that air. This is our main root cause for the simultaneous heating and cooling. And last but certainly not least, these final two charts, this gets to the question we had earlier on the kind of energy cost calculations that are being performed. This is what I mean by the bottom up approach. We are looking at this individual air handling unit, and we are calculating the ideal versus the actual heating and cooling rates on this piece of equipment. So on the ideal heating rate calculation, pretty straightforward. That valve should have been closed. That's easy math. We should have had we should have had no heating energy on that piece of equipment. That's this dark black line at the bottom. Because we're leaking hot water through the coil, we are calculating the actual heating rate on this dotted red line. This is the energy waste that's occurring because of that leaking preheat coil. Down below here, we have a separate calculation for what's happening on the cooling coil. So this cooling coil is downstream of the preheat coil. We know that it's still maintaining a supply air temperature set point, and the way it's doing that is by consuming more chilled water than it should. So we're also calculating the ideal cooling versus actual cooling rate to essentially eliminate that heat that has been unnecessarily added to the piece of equipment, to the airstream here. It's these two charts that allow us to do a very accurate calculation on the energy waste that occurred on this day, and help teams that are maintaining buildings prioritize some of their work based on the actual dollars that are being thrown away on some of these issues. That's a very common way that a lot of our users come into Clockworks to find and act on this information. Is to look at, well, that $790 a day is going to add up pretty quick if I don't get to this piece of equipment and do something about it. And with that, maybe that was a decent segue over to the Archibus side, where we can again take these costs and these priorities and use those to automatically trigger an action within Archibus.
Thank you, Dennis.
And while we're switching over, there were a few more questions that came in. So
Sure.
the first one is,
All right.
safe to assume data like building IDs, equipment IDs, et cetera, can be normalized or synced between the two systems?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's basically the first part of the integration between Clockworks and Archibus is to do that mapping exercise and make sure we have a one-to-one connection between buildings and equipment.
Perfect. And then does this integration occur with Archibus SaaS or the on-premise?
Either. It'll be part of the integration. It has to, it'll be enabled through some services, as Dennis mentioned, but it is available in 26.3 and either way, and it can be deployed in either way, SaaS or non-SaaS.
Perfect. Thank you. Octavian, I think we're ready for your side of the demo.
Thank you, Danielle. So let me give you a brief summary of what I'm going to present. First of all, I'm going to show you the diagnostics that we have imported from Clockworks. Then I'll show you the work requests, and then in the end, I'll show you how to configure the diagnostics to automatically generate work requests. But first thing first, this is a report that shows us all the diagnostics that we have imported from Clockworks in the past few days. And again, this is an automated process that happens, for example, overnight. You can schedule it to happen at any time you want. It doesn't have to be on a daily basis. It can also be on a weekly basis and at the time that you prefer. And we will import all of the diagnostics from Clockworks for the analysis that you have allowed to for Archibus to import diagnostics, and we'll present them to you in this report. Notice we also have the full description that Dennis was showing, and several other information. The three priorities again that Dennis was showing in Clockworks, and we pretty much import the full description of the diagnostic, except for the charts at the bottom of the report. And I'll show you in the next step. You also have a link to the original report in Clockworks, so you can always jump back and see those charts. And if you notice, not all of the diagnoses have generated work requests. Some have generated, but others didn't generate any work requests. And that's because it depends on the priority that you set for each analysis to generate work requests. For example, the two diagnostics at the top, they have pretty large priorities for comfort, energy, and maintenance. And let's assume that you have set up that any diagnostic with a priority over 7 will generate a work request. Well, in this example, if we look at this example, the maximum priority value is 10. So for this equipment and this diagnostic, Archibus will automatically generate work requests. And this also happens automatically, and it's a scheduled workflow rule that again runs at the time that you want to schedule it. Typically, it will run overnight right after the import, but you can choose to schedule it when you think it's best to generate those work requests. And this is, in fact, if you look at the date and at the problem, this is exactly the problem that Dennis was showing, and I noticed that I have a work request for it. So as a maintenance manager, I can go to the maintenance console. And in the maintenance console, you can see that I already have a lot of work to do, but I can focus only on the diagnostics that, on the work requests that were reported from diagnostics. And I can do that by using this filter. So all of these work requests have been automatically generated last night from the diagnostic that I have that Archibas has automatically imported. And furthermore, I can actually filter for that specific work request that I was showing to you earlier, and I can look at it. And we've mapped the information that you saw in the diagnostic to the work request, and now you get the full diagnostic description as the description of the work request. And this is a pretty large text, but notice at the bottom I have a link to the report in Clockworks. So if I want to also see the charts, I can always copy and paste this in a browser and see that report. You might have remembered in one of the slides that Dennis was showing that all of the diagnostics from Clockworks map to a high priority work request in Archibas, and that's available here. Of course, we can improve this over time and allow you to choose the priority. And then the analysis type from Clockworks maps to a specific problem type, and this is configurable. You can choose to map the analysis to whatever problem type you have in your system. And in the next tab, the equipment tab, we have some additional information regarding the diagnostics. First of all, at the top, you see the diagnostic that has generated this work request. So you can always go back to it and try to find out more information. But you can also see other diagnostics that might not have generated any work request, like this at the bottom. They haven't generated any work request because they have a very low priority. You can always look at those, and if you determine that that's an additional problem that you can report, you can manually report that problem. But we'll show you the full history of diagnostics for this specific equipment, so we can make an informed decision. And even if you are looking at a work request for an equipment that wasn't generated from a diagnostic, you'll still get the history of diagnostics, just in case for that equipment, maybe there are some diagnostics from the past that you might need to look at. So again, we give you all the information so you can make an informed decision and let know your field team if there are additional problems to look into. And of course, after this step, after all the work requests have been reported, if you have set up SLAs for corrective maintenance, those will pick up the work request and they will move them through the entire maintenance workflow. So I've showed you the list of diagnostics that we imported from Clockworks. Then I showed you the work requests that were generated. You notice that not all the diagnostics generate work requests. So now I'll show you how to configure what analysis and what priorities will generate a work request. So all the views in the latest release, you'll find all the views under technologies, integration, BMS, and the view to configure what gets imported and what generates work request is called configure BMS analysis. And here you find all the analyses that Clockworks run. I think there are over 50 analyses, but let's pick the first one. For this one, notice I have an import flag, and this is set to yes. This means that we are going to import all the diagnostics coming from this type of analysis. And then also notice that we have a flag regarding creating work request. That's also set to yes. If it was set to no, Archibas would never create a work request for a diagnosis coming in from this analysis type. But if it's set to yes, the next step for Archibas is to look at the priority trigger limit. This is the minimum priority from which Archibas will generate work request. In the previous screen, regarding the equipment diagnostics history, I've shown you the 3 priorities. Archibus is looking at all the 3 priorities and is taking the maximum one and is comparing it with what you have configured for the analysis. So if you have configured that the priority limit is 7, then for that type of analysis, all the diagnostics with one of these 3 priorities over 7 will generate a work request. So in this case, we will generate a work request also the same for the next line. That's pretty much it on the Archibus side. Everything is automated. So basically in the morning when you get to work, you find all the problems reported. And fortunately, maybe if you have SLAs, also some of them are routed by the SLAs systems. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and this is Dennis with Clockworks jumping in. I'm going to add one quick point, I think, to Octavian's demo there, and that's, one really unique thing about the way the Clockworks diagnostics work is that we really have one global library of these kind of analyses that we run. And so what that means is you can essentially subscribe to a very clean list of the analytics types. So you could say, I only want to automate work orders for, chillers, boilers, and this type of air handler issue within my sites. And you could do that kind of globally across all of your sites with a very simple configuration there. And I think that's what makes this combined approach very interesting. It's a very simple thing to configure, and it should work across all of your buildings in a very uniform manner so that you have consistent work orders being produced over exactly what you wanted to act on in that automated way. So we're looking forward to seeing how that kind of comes together. I think it's back to me to share one last slide. And Fred, I think I'll let you talk to this one as well. 1 second.
Yep, sure. And then we'll leave time for questions. Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, so what you saw today, the question may be how do we get it? So there are 3 components that we highlighted. The first is Clockworks, the second is Archibus, and the third is the integration between the 2. So those are the 3 components that that you would get if you want to make use of the integration. The integration itself would be an establishment fee, a one-time fee to set up, and then an annual fee going forward, just to support the integration on your site. The prerequisites for the integration and setup, just in a little bit more detail, just on the Archibus side, is Archibus maintenance is the module that would be required. And as we talked about before, there's mapping of location, like buildings, as there was a question on that, buildings and equipment. Problem type definitions and SLA definitions are the prerequisites on the Archibus side to make sure that the integration, the data flows naturally into Archibus and goes into the right hands. For this, we ask that you contact Archibus account management, or just Archibus in general to inquire about this, and we'll make sure that you get the right introductions to both on the Archibus side and the Clockworks side to get this going for your site. I think that's the information I wanted to share about how to get. I think that is the last slide, Dennis, and I think with that we can entertain more questions.
Perfect. We do have a few more questions that have come in. So the first one is, again, I think just maybe a confirmation that the condition-based maintenance is referring to the diagnostics-driven conditions such as comfort, energy priority, and maintenance priority, instead of the effects or how that affects the equipment condition of excellent, good, fair, poor.
Yeah, I think that's right. So the things we are detecting automatically in clockworks are really about the performance. So the condition of the actual temperatures and airflows that aren't in their ideal state, right? Now, how that impacts the overall equipment as an asset and the condition of that is kind of a different story. We can also look at kind of degradation in performance over time, which is an interesting thing to pair with those asset assessments that you might be doing. Things like a chiller's kW per ton over time or an air handler's kW per CFM can be higher level key performance indicators that would also work well with an asset condition analysis that you might be doing. So I think that was right how it was questioned, and hopefully that makes more sense if I answered that correctly.
I think that sounds about right, Dennis. I don't know if I have anything to add to that, but yeah, it is not necessarily a condition assessment, but more diagnostics. And as the acronym implies, it's fault detection. So are things working ideally, and are there problems that we can actually fix?
Perfect, thank you. The next question we have on the Archivist Maintenance Console, are the links provided by Clockworks going to be clickable? So they just click on the link and it takes them to the report instead of copying and pasting the values of the link into a browser?
Good question. There is right now, I believe it's that copy approach. We can look into how to make that an HTML link. I noticed the same thing, of course. I think that is a freeform text field in Archibus, but certainly there'll be there should be ways to be able to put that as a separate entity so that it can be clickable.
Great, thank you. The next question I think everybody is wondering is, what does this look like on a mobile device?
I can answer on the Archibus side. Certainly, the maintenance console is really for the supervisors looking at all of the maintenance work orders and that are part of our work team are working on in their queue. Now, once it's assigned out to a technician to fix, and SLAs can do that, of course, automatically, then the same information, the work order information, can be brought up on Archibus OnSite, which is a new mobile app for maintenance technicians. So they would be able to bring up the same work order information and asset information on their mobile phone. I believe we had that image on one of the slides showing that the work order information, the asset history, diagnostics can be available on the Archibus OnSite device.
Great, thank you. The next question, are we planning on adding an integration to Clockworks Analytics to any of the other iOffice SpaceIQ products?
Right now we focused on Archibus Maintenance because of the family of products that seem to be the best fit for integrating in fault detection and diagnostics from Clockworks. There are other asset-based products in the iOffice family. Certainly that's something we could look at in the future, but right now the integration made the most sense from on the Archibus side.
Great, thank you. The next question, this is around the problem type definitions. Once they are set, can they go in and change them? Can users go in and change them?
Sure. Octavian showed, and he may correct me if I'm wrong, but Octavian showed the way that the diagnostics can be configured to be mapped to problem types in Archibus, and certainly if they change, the person who has access to that view could certainly change them. Of course, changing that would also entail wanting to change the SLA that problem type is attached to. So it would be a matter of making sure that if you're changing the problem type, that there's also an SLA that is available for that problem type so that the workflow carries forward.
Perfect.
And I
Well,
add that in our sample data, we do provide some mappings to problem types, but they are optional, of course, and you can configure them.
great. Thank you. Well, I think we're right at time, and I think we've answered all of the questions. So thank you, Dennis, Fred, and Octavian for joining us today. And thank you, everyone that has also joined us. We hope you found it helpful, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or your Archivist business partner.